Welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. Today's show is focused on the planning needs of business owners. I'm joined by author and business succession planning expert Randy Long to discuss critical steps entrepreneurs need to take to maximize the value of their businesses and to prepare it for a future sale or transfer. I'll also answer a viewer question on savings bonds. Let's roll. And we're going to talk business on today's program because, well, we've talked about this before. Business is the backbone of America, and I'm glad to have somebody in the program and in the studio with us with a lot of backbone. Randy Long.
Hey, good to be here, my friend.
Good to see you. So Randy rejoins us. He's been on the program before, and if they come back, you know they're an excellent guest. Randy is a certified financial planner, law background as well.
Yes.
JD, and also a certified exit planner. We don't hear that designation very often.
We do not. It's relatively new. I'm going to say it's been around 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
And it's come about, I think, as a result of, there's a huge number of baby boomers that are headed for retirement. And so to gear up to get people qualified to help handle that group, a friend of mine, John Brown, created that organization years ago.
And a few of those baby boomers might want to sell their businesses.
A bunch of them do.
Well, I love Randy's story. He brings together an interesting combination of skill set because I know this is a complicated area, but it's an area where so many business owners need help making the right plans to exit well. And I know you've also written the book, The Braveheart Exit.
Right.
Because that's what it takes.
It does. It takes a brave heart to do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. It takes courage and responsibility. We used to use the word stewardship.
Yeah, you beat me to it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you're not just looking at yourself, but you're being a good steward or stewardess of the financial and, of course, the other personal elements of having a business.
And the family.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to have you on the program again because there's more to talk about, as you know. And we talked on a couple other shows we've done, talked about all the considerations. We've talked about the stakeholders. We've talked about family being involved. And, you know, some businesses will sell to the family, some will go to an outside buyer.
Right.
When you're dealing with family, there's some special considerations.
There are.
And the one I want to drill down on is when you've got some family that's going to be involved and some family that's not.
Right.
How does a business owner deal with that?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and one that we get all the time. It's very, very common, because typically there is one kid that works in the business and 2 or 3 or 4 that don't. And the kids that are outside of the business think that the kid inside the business has all the benefits and all the opportunities and gets paid too much.
Sure.
And the kids that are outside, the kid thinks he's just building their net worth for all of his work. So it goes both ways. But ultimately, the goal here is to transition. If you're going to go to a child, it should go to the child working in the business, in my opinion. There are circumstances where, you know, you can create voting and non-voting stock, and you can help have the non-voting stock go to some of the kids as a benefit to them. S-corp stock especially works well, so they'll get dividends. But at the end of the day, I like instead to have mostly the stock to go to the kid who's in the business. And then when it goes to him, though, we've got to make a division in his inheritance, if you will, or in the sale of the company. And that is how much of the business has grown based on their efforts or industries versus how much was based on the parents. And that's, you know, that's not scientific, but a best guess, because what we want to do is we don't want to penalize the kid that worked in the business for helping to grow it. We want him or her to get all the benefit of their hard work and their expertise. But the kids that aren't in the business, they're just children. And then there's a piece of that kid that's in the business where he's just a kid too. So what we want to do is make sure that the part that he didn't earn but he's inheriting is also offset, and the other siblings get similar inheritances value-wise. Not necessarily asset-wise, but value-wise.
So this is easy if there's a lot of cash.
It's easy if there's a lot of cash.
But if you don't have a lot of cash, you've got to get a little more creative, maybe with some life insurance or
Right.
some other ways to help balance, what do you call that, estate equalization?
Yes, estate equalization. And there are a number of ways to do it. Of course, cash, as you said, is the easiest way. You can allocate other assets to the kids besides cash also. You can even do a note so that the kid is buying out a portion of the business and pay them over time. That's another way to do it. Life insurance, frankly, is to the extent that the people are, we can underwrite them for reasonable prices and they start soon enough. Life insurance is really the best way to go, in my opinion. Bang for the buck, it's the most efficient way to get it done.
Sure. Tax efficient, tax free?
Yeah, I mean, there's some structure behind that we have to build to make it come out that way, but yes.
Okay. Well, I want to get to a couple key things today as well, Randy, and that is the crew wants me to ask you some war stories.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of things. You've worked with a lot of families, a lot of business owners in your experience and doing this work. What are some of the maybe one or two of some real successes that make you proud, make you feel good about the work you've done, where you've been able to make a big impact, or you've seen people, to their credit, do the proper planning?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of the families that we've worked with, as an example, have underestimated the value of their company. And that primarily comes from the fact that they think of themselves as selling within their industry or within their locale.
Okay.
But we were able to add a 4x above what they expected to get.
4 times what they thought.
4 times what they thought they were going to get by taking them to the right markets and the right way with controlled auctions. And so we've had a couple of those that have been huge successes, and the family was like blown away. So
did you get a tip?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Okay.
I think you earned it.
I think I did. So that's a great one. And you asked for another success story. We had a family that I've worked with. I'm actually on the 5th generation of transitioning. It's an agricultural family.
Sure.
And we've kept the farm inside of the family for 5 generations and taken care of. And that's, I'm not that old. I've been practicing since '83. And so
that's a lot of generations within that time period.
Yeah, and remember I've told you before that people don't always die in the order they're supposed to or when they're supposed to. And so you have to plan for contingencies. Well, in this family, twice contingencies showed up that took over what our main planning was supposed to be, which ended up compressing the generations on transfer times. And if we hadn't have done the work for it, the family would have lost the farms. No doubt about it.
No pun intended. Yeah. So the planning ahead, you can't just look at the first step, you got to look down the line to achieve the success. How about when things just people stick their head in the sand, or they think they're going to live forever, or they think there's time for this, or here, I'm sure you've heard this. I'm too busy running my business, Randy. I can't do this now. Talk to me in 10 years.
Yeah, I just had a guy that we were working with that we probably worked with them for a year or so in helping them get started on growing the business. But when we were trying to get them to put in place our durability planning, which we talked about in an earlier show, to make sure that they survive to the sale or whatever it's going to be, they basically said they just wanted us to step back for 6 months to a year so that they could finish growing as much as they wanted to grow. Now, I don't know whether or not he survives to that time, but there's a lot of bad things that can happen, and if you're not prepared for it, the family and the employees will suffer because he isn't ready for that transition, believe me. So that's one problem that we find once in a while. Another one is we talked about before about poisoning the well. We had one family where the owner tried to sell the company on his own, and as it turned out, we ended up selling that company probably for half of what it should have been sold for, because there were 2 main buyers that were likely to buy, and we were going to use everybody else, to basically pull the price up around them. But when they were both taken off the table because the owner had tried to sell to both of those himself, and of course they came in and they basically kept negotiating him down until he said no, and then he came and wanted help. So he poisoned the well twice and ended up getting less than he should have. And then we have finally one more war story here. We have a friend that tried to sell the business on his own. He hired an M&A firm himself to come in, and it was a big, I'm sorry, he hired I'm sorry, it wasn't a hire. He invited in a New York investment bank firm to buy his firm. And they brought their people in, and they just kept fishing for more information and learning everything they could about the business.
Trying to do their due diligence?
Right.
Or was it something else?
Well, they were actually there, as it turned out, they were actually there to learn what his success secrets were because he was building a massive business. Wow. And they just wanted the information. And a friend of his who was an M&A guy told him he needed to get those people out because they were doing nothing that had to do with steps of buying that business. They were just mining his information. So when you don't know what you're doing, you can get taken advantage of across the board in this whole thing.
Isn't this so true in life? When you don't know what you don't know, it's when you get hurt.
Yes, that's so true.
I mean, and we're talking about something that for a lot of business owners, this is the biggest asset they have.
It is. And I mentioned, too, on an earlier show that people that are willing to spend money on professionals to help them do this planning work and to execute all these things, they get much, much more for the sale of their companies than those that try to do it alone.
Well, here's what's ironic to me, Randy. We've talked about this. If somebody sells a business and they have a bunch of money and they come to me and say, David, manage my money. Right. And I manage their account for a fee. Right. Okay, and let's say they're going to pay me 1% for managing that. Well, why wouldn't they pay 1% or whatever it exactly works out to be, but allocate some cost to growing the business and then selling it.
That's right.
And doing it correctly, because I mean, we can do some good things with the money they bring us, sure, but you got to have the money to bring.
Right, and remember, we also mentioned that 70 to 90% of a business owner's net worth is tied up in that business. So he should be spending money on managing the business in such a way that it produces the highest and best return for his family, or is prepared for a transition to the next generation so that the family wealth is grown and the family is protected and preserved.
Well, and the other thing that a lot of people may not know is that a business owner or a small business can produce a much higher return in terms of what, the cash that comes out for the assets that are deployed versus investing in the stock market.
Definitely, and going forward too, where multiples are these days, looking ahead 7 to 10 years out, you're looking at relatively small to relatively medium returns, but I would guess not high. Sure. Based on where we are. So that whole idea about the skill set that it takes to manage a business is a different skill set that it takes to manage money and to live with money too, frankly. Right. So there's some learning and transition that has to take place, but most of them are really probably just better off keeping the wealth within the family and using that generational capital, intellectual capital and experience to continue to grow the wealth of the family and also ground them, in a work ethic.
I think that's critical. I think that the thing that you made me think of, Randy, that I wanted to also ask you is when you think about some of these situations you described where basically business owners don't know what they don't know and they're tripping over themselves and they're kind of getting put in some awkward positions, let's flip this over. For people out there who are watching this program that are thinking about buying an existing business, or they've worked for a company, they want to buy it from the owner, or they want to buy a business, they've got money from whatever, what are some of the things you would say to them with this knowledge?
So my advice for the buyers is 180 degrees different from the sellers.
I thought it might be.
So we typically represent sellers, not buyers. Once in a while we do represent buyers, but my goal as a buyer is to deal directly with the business owner, because I know that once I get the business owner exchanging information with me, that we'll do a much better job on buying that business at a much more reasonable price than if it's run as a controlled auction.
They don't want a guy like you involved.
They do not want a guy like me involved.
You're dangerous.
If they're, I mean, if they want me to help them buy it, I can help them.
That's different, right.
But that's different, but you're right. The skill set, it works both ways, but the problem is if I'm a buyer, I don't want to buy with an M&A firm involved especially.
I don't want to give too aggressive of an analogy, but it's almost like the lion or the predator culling out the wildebeest from the herd. They don't want there to be this, they want them isolated.
They do.
Because when you get an isolation, then there's that communication. They hope to get back and forth. And also, they're getting that buy-in from the person and connecting with them and maybe not in their best interest.
Yeah, and that emotional piece is what they're trying to, so you're right. That's why it's nice to have a person, a professional between them if they're selling, because we don't want them to sell an emotion or guilt or friendship or any of the things that they might try to use against them.
Emotion's expensive, isn't it?
Very.
Yeah, and you've dealt with people who have gotten, I mean, we obviously recognize there's an emotional attachment to your business, but there's a process here that I'm hearing you talk about, and the business owner needs to be removed from that to some degree, don't they?
Definitely. The business is never going to be what it should be worth if the business owner is involved in the day-to-day running of it. So we've got to extricate him, divide him or her responsibilities into a management team, or move them out and let the company grow to the next level. And as it's growing, if he wants to sell it, we can sell it. If he wants to keep it, it becomes a great asset for the family.
That's the thing that's always struck me in talking with you and in this area, Randy, is that the things that make the business worth the most to a potential buyer are the things that make it worth the most to the business owner and to his or her family.
Exactly the same.
And I just think that's fascinating.
It is. And people, that's why when people talk about the timing of exit planning, honestly, we like our people to start thinking about this and doing this, especially once the business is more than just a job, But even when we work with startups and such sometimes, and so we're already planning the exit at the startup.
And with the end in mind, if you will, that has people thinking from the very beginning about the types of people they need to have and not creating a situation where everything is so reliant on either them or another key employee.
That's right. That's right. So you've got to, again, that idea about minimizing risk to the buyer. We want the buyer to be to view our business as a low risk, high opportunity kind of a buy. And so one of those risks that we would like to remove is too much emphasis or need for a key employee or two, or particular skill sets that we would like to diversify within our company so that there's multiple people capable of doing that work. So there's some ongoing training that we need to be careful of. And if you find an employee that is unwilling to share knowledge and expertise, then you don't want to build a company around them, because they're just going to hold you hostage at the end. And I've seen that a number of times.
That could be expensive as well.
When the owner can't do what the key employee's doing and nobody else can do it either, the key employee's an owner whether he knows it or not.
He's got some skin in the game. It's just he's got to figure out how to get paid for it.
Yes, and if he's wily, he'll leverage it.
Well, if you don't have ownership and you're going to be not participating, I can certainly see that perspective.
Yep, and the owners, if you're going to run a company like that, ultimately, and we like to have our management teams especially have some buy-in, some goals. If they reach certain goals, they get a certain, and there are different ways, of course, to give them a share of the revenue or a share of the sale price or whatever it is without actually giving them ownership. That's beyond the scope of this meeting here, but there's a lot of planning opportunities that we can't get to.
You can give opportunity for growth and participation in the success of the company without giving away control.
You can, and without giving stock.
I like that. All right, very good stuff. Again, we run out of time, Randy. So much good stuff, but thank you so much for being with us, and it's always a pleasure.
Love the time with you.
All right, thank you.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.